I'm a geriatric physician, and for over 3 decades, I've worked closely with elderly patients in specialized care facilities. Throughout those years, I've had the privilege and at times the heartbreak of hearing countless life stories from individuals in their 80s and 90s. These weren't just conversations filled with memories, but moments colored with deep reflection and often quiet regret. Many of them have told me if I could go back to my 60s, I would live completely differently. Not because they were young then, but because they still had the strength and time to change. Yet, they didn't. That's why, in today's video, I want to share something deeply personal, especially with those of you in your 50s and 60s. What you'll hear isn't theory, and it isn't advice from textbooks. It's wisdom earned through lived experience, through years of choices, and in many cases through the pain of hindsight. My hope is that if even one person listens and begins to make small changes today, you won't find yourself looking back one day asking, "What if?" Let's explore together the most common regrets of those in their later years, and more importantly, how you can avoid repeating them. 1. Neglecting health. Your 60s are the golden years to build healthy habits. One of the most common regrets I hear from my elderly patients is this simple sentence: "If only I had taken better care of my health earlier." And they don't say it while walking around. They say it while gripping a walker, sitting in a wheelchair, or struggling to lift a spoon. An older gentleman once whispered to me, his eyes gazing blankly out the window, "Back when I was 60, I thought I was still strong. A bit of back pain, some sleepless nights. I thought it was normal. I told myself it'll pass." But it didn't. It just piled up until one day it all came crashing down. We tend to underestimate the power of small habits. Walking 30 minutes a day, staying hydrated, sleeping regularly, eating less salt, managing stress. But it's these very habits that form the foundation of a strong body in your 70s and 80s. And it's the lack of them that leads to chronic disease, daily medication, frequent hospital visits, and a slow loss of independence. I've seen firsthand the difference between two people of the same age. One who began taking care of their health in their 60s, and one who didn't. A decade later, one is still climbing stairs, tending a garden, playing with grandchildren. The other is confined indoors, watching life from behind a window pane. Health doesn't wait. And if you're in your 50s or 60s right now, you're standing at a crossroads. Will you start investing in your body today, or wait until your choices are no longer yours to make? 2. Missing precious time with family, work, and busyness often rob us of what matters most. I once spoke with an 82-year-old man who couldn't finish a sentence without pausing to gather himself. He told me that decades ago his wife often asked, "Let's take the kids on a trip. It's been so long since we all sat down for a meal together." But he always replied, "Let me finish this project first. Then we'll go." The project ended, another began, and then one day she passed away, quietly, after a long illness. He didn't notice in time because he was too busy. The children grew up, moved out, started their own families. Life moved on. Many people don't realize that time with family doesn't repeat itself. Children grow up, parents age. If we don't slow down to savor dinners, conversations, hand-holding, laughter, it all becomes something we remember, not something we still have. When elderly people say they wish to return to their 60s, it's not because they want to earn more. They wish they had stayed longer at the dinner table. They wish they had skipped a meeting to watch their grandchild perform. They wish they had said thank you or I'm sorry before it was too late. If you're approaching or living in your 60s, remember, your family doesn't need you to be perfect, they just need you to be present. Because someday all you'll want is one more day with them, and sometimes that day won't come back. From here, we'll continue exploring more of these powerful lessons on finances, loneliness, and the small daily joys that build a meaningful life in our later years. But remember this, everything begins with two foundations, your health and your relationships. Protect those and you've already taken the first step toward a future without regret. 3. mismanaging money, spending freely after retirement, only to face financial struggles within a few years. I met a retired teacher once, a man in his 80s, who sighed deeply as he recalled the first few years after leaving work. When I received my severance pay, it felt like a fortune. 600 million won, he said. I thought, how could I ever spend all of this? So he did the things he had long postponed. He traveled, took up golf, dined out often. He finally lived the life he had delayed for decades. But then, out of nowhere, illness came knocking. Medical bills mounted quickly. Within 3 years, half of his retirement funds had vanished. He told me, eyes clouded with regret, "Now, we don't even turn on the heater in winter. I've given up all my hobbies. My wife and I argue constantly, mostly about money. If I could go back, I would have managed it all differently." Unfortunately, his story is far from rare. Studies show that more than half of retirees with significant pensions or severance packages face serious financial difficulty within 5 years. Why? Because they let their guard down. They believe the money will last forever until it doesn't. What many don't realize is that retirement isn't a final reward, it's the beginning of a new chapter, one that might last 20, 30, even 40 years. If you step into that chapter without a plan, you're not walking into freedom. You're walking into a slow, avoidable crisis. I often tell my patients your financial security in retirement depends less on how much you have and more on how wisely you manage what you do have. And wise management starts not with fear, but with clarity. If you're in your 50s or 60s, now is the time to learn that difference. 4. Not maintaining muscle through exercise, leading to frailty and loss of mobility in old age. Oftentimes, when people think of aging, they imagine a decline in memory, vision, or hearing. But what they don't realize is that the real enemy of old age is muscle loss. And it begins silently in your 60s, if not earlier. I had a patient once, a man in his late 60s who loved hiking. He was active, full of energy, but as his routine slowed, so did his strength. A few years later, he began struggling to climb stairs. Soon he couldn't walk to the bathroom without help. At 88, he's been using a wheelchair for over 18 years. What happened? A condition called sarcopenia, the age loss of muscle mass. Starting in our 60s, we lose up to 2 to 3% of muscle each year if we don't actively work to preserve it. Over just 5 years, that can mean a 15% reduction in muscle mass. Enough to take away basic independence. What's tragic is how preventable it all is. Just a few minutes of strength-based movement each day, leg raises, squats, resistance training can protect your body far into old age. The problem is, most people wait until it's too late, and once you lose muscle, regaining it becomes 10 times harder. Your muscles are your freedom. They allow you to walk unassisted, to live without a caregiver, to do the simple things that make life feel like yours. I say this often, you don't stop moving because you get old. You get old because you stop moving. As we continue, we'll explore not just how to protect the body, but how to nourish the mind, how to guard against cognitive decline, preserve your independence, and build a retirement that isn't just long but fulfilling. Because what's the use of longevity if life loses its joy? 5. Relying too heavily on children. Many grow lonely and disappointed when their expectations aren't met. There's a quiet sorrow I've often seen in elderly parents, a sorrow that doesn't come from illness, but from unmet expectation. One woman I knew, widowed in her 70s, spent her days waiting by the phone. She would call her children daily, ask them to visit on weekends, remind them of her doctor's appointments. At first, they came, then less and less. Eventually, her calls went unanswered, and holidays grew quieter. With tears in her eyes, she once told me, "I thought if I gave them everything, time, money, my youth, they would always be there for me. But maybe I asked for too much. Maybe I forgot they had lives of their own." This is a painful reality for many older parents, the realization that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. In their loneliness, many elders lean heavily on their children, not just for help, but for purpose, identity, and emotional connection. But when that support doesn't come as hoped, disappointment turns into silence, and silence into isolation. Psychologists call this the parental sacrifice syndrome. It happens when parents, after giving everything to their children, feel abandoned when their devotion isn't returned in kind. But here's what I've learned. Love based on expectation is a fragile thing. One wise mother once told her children, "The best gift I can give you is a healthy, independent life in my old age, so you never have to worry about me and I never have to feel like a burden." If you're in your 50s or 60s, now is the time to create that version of aging. It doesn't mean pushing your family away. It means living in a way that allows love to be freely given, not gilded into. It means being someone your children visit out of joy, not obligation. 6. Overlooking the small joys of daily life only to realize too late that happiness was always in the simple things. I once asked a patient in hospice what she regretted most. Her answer wasn't surprising, but it was deeply moving. "I spent my life chasing what I thought would make me happy. Money, promotions, a bigger house. But the happiest moments?" She smiled. "The morning sunlight on my kitchen table, the sound of my grandson's laughter, a quiet cup of coffee with my husband. And I didn't realize it until I no longer had them." This is a common realization among the elderly, not that they wanted more, but that they missed what was already there. They were so focused on someday that they forgot to live the right now. In our working years, we often live for milestones. The next achievement, the next vacation, the next phase of life. We postpone joy, believing we'll have time for it later. But happiness doesn't always wait. Sometimes it's the soft morning breeze, the shared smile, the familiar scent of home, and if we don't pause to notice it, we miss it entirely. I've met patients who found peace in gardening, in watching birds from their porch, in writing down 3 things they're grateful for every night. None of these things cost much, but they gave a sense of meaning that luxury never could. If you're approaching your 60s, take this as a gentle reminder. Happiness is not something you chase, it's something you notice. And the ability to notice it begins with slowing down, being present, and making room for small joys. As we move toward the final reflections, we'll explore what it truly means to prepare for a meaningful old age, not just avoiding regret, but cultivating purpose, resilience, and deep, lasting joy. Because a life well lived isn't about how many years we have, but how deeply we've lived each one. Over the years, I've asked hundreds of older patients a simple question. If you could speak to your younger self, what daily habits would you tell them to start? Their answers weren't grand. They weren't about achieving more or owning more. They were gentle, often quiet truths, consistent, ordinary things that over time made the extraordinary difference between aging with grace or regret. One woman in her 80s told me, "I started walking 30 minutes a day in my early 60s just because the doctor said I should. I never thought it would keep me out of the hospital in my 80s. She smiles when she says this, now able to carry groceries up a flight of stairs with ease, while many of her peers can no longer leave the house on their own. Another man, now 85, shared, "Drinking 2 liters of water a day. Simple, right? But it saved my kidneys. I watched friends go on dialysis in their 70s. I didn't." These little decisions, easy to overlook in our busy 50s and 60s, become the difference between autonomy and dependence. And then there's sleep, something so many of us sacrifice in our working years. A retired nurse told me, "Once I began prioritizing 7 full hours of sleep and adding more protein to my meals, I felt like I was aging backwards. My energy returned, and my bones stopped aching." But it's not just the body that needs care, it's the mind. One of the most remarkable transformations I've seen was in a woman who, after losing her husband, began learning watercolor painting. She wasn't trying to become an artist. "I just needed something to look forward to each morning," she said. That small hobby, which began as a distraction, became a lifeline. Research confirms this. New hobbies stimulate the brain, slow cognitive decline, and restore purpose. There's also the lesson so many wish they had known earlier. Don't give everything to your children. Give with love, yes, but not with sacrifice. An 84-year-old father once said to me, "I gave away all my savings thinking it would bring us closer, but money doesn't buy closeness. It just made me feel forgotten." His words weren't bitter, just clear. You have to keep something for yourself. Not just money, dignity, and of course there's the question of loneliness. A silent epidemic among the elderly. The happiest older adults I know are the ones who learn how to be with others and how to be with themselves. One woman divides her days into 3 parts: time to connect with friends or neighbors, time to grow by reading, learning, and time to reflect through meditation or journaling. She told me, "That's how I make sure I'm never truly alone, even when no one is around." And almost every happy elder I've met has one final shared habit: gratitude. They write it down. 3 things every day. Some keep a notebook, others just whisper it before bed. But the effect is the same: less bitterness, more joy. "It's hard to be angry at life," one 90-year-old woman told me, "when you begin your morning thankful for the sunlight and end it thankful for a warm meal." All of these habits are small. None of them require wealth or youth or perfect circumstances. But they do require intention and a willingness to begin before life forces you to. 60 is not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where you finally have the wisdom of experience and still enough strength to choose differently. It's the moment when your past can inform your future, not define it. You don't have to wait for perfect timing, or for life to slow down, or for someone to give you permission. The most powerful decision you can make is to start right now. Choose to walk. Choose to rest. Choose connection, simplicity, gratitude. Choose the kind of life your future self will thank you for. Happiness doesn't begin someday. It begins the moment you decide it's worth choosing.